How to put an eye splice in Dyneema. Okay, first of all, if you don't want to listen to all the blabber that I'm going on about it, it's laid out in chapters on the actual timeline below. Just jump to the chapter that you want to watch and it'll cut all the garbage that I'm talking about out. Okay, personally, I love Dyneema. First of all, for the fact that you can make soft shackles with it, and secondly, you can actually splice it very easily. It's not too difficult at all to do. So, I mean, the question is, what else do you do with Dyneema? If you use Dyneema quite a lot, what other things do you make with Dyneema? Okay, another thing that I would like to say as well is this, that if you are using Dyneema for critical loads, especially yourself, because I consider you a critical load, then do your research on it. Yes, Dyneema is very, very strong, but do your research onto how effective certain parts of Dyneema are once you have, say, for example, tied an eye splice into it. And a good resource for that is a channel called How Not To, where they basically will test Dyneema to destruction. So anyway, what we're going to do today is we're going to put an eye into our Dyneema and then we're going to lock it off with a little bit of seizing at this point here, either the red or the green. So anyway, let's get on and let's get knotting. Okay, so we're working with Dyneema here. In my particular case, I have got 6mm diameter Dyneema. And the first thing that you need to do is if you're creating an eye in Dyneema, you need to measure a distance of 60 times the actual diameter of the Dyneema. So in other words, I've got 6mm of Dyneema. 6 times 60 equals 360 millimeters or 36 centimeters. And the first thing that I'm going to do is just open up my tape measure, and unfortunately my tape measure is broken, and that's why I use my small wooden fid here. Just ram it in the end there and we've locked it in place. And then the next thing that we do is we go to the 36 centimeter mark or 360 millimeter mark and we measure to the left hand side. And so take it to the left hand side and you can see then at that point there, I've already done it because I actually messed up in the recording. So I've already done here, I've now measured 36 centimeters from the end here to that point there. So now that we've done that, by doing that, what we've done is we have maximized the actual capabilities of our Dyneema. It's the minimum you want. You are actually going to tuck all this into the core of the Dyneema, and that'll become clear as we go along. Now the next thing we need to do is when we've got our first marker point there, which is at the 36 centimeter mark, the next thing we need to decide on is how big or small we want the eye of our splice to be. And the other thing to consider as well is when you're putting an eye into Dyneema or an eye into any form of eye splice, the maximum distance you have here is 30 degrees. Okay? If it's too wide, you're putting too much stress on your actual eye splice itself. Okay, so in my particular case, I know for a fact that, let's stretch this out again. I know for a fact, I've been instructed, here we go, that from this 36 centimeter mark here, I want to now put in an extra 15 centimeters for the eye. So I'm going to take this to the 15 centimeter mark. So there's the 15. And then at this point here, get my pen again and just mark off at that point there. And that's it. What we've done now is we've put in our markers or guides to help us create our splice. And you will then see that if we then bring those 2 points together, so those 2 marker points there, That's the size of loop that I want in my splice. And so the next thing that we're going to do then is actually start the process of splicing our Dyneema. The next step, well, it will be for me, is I've got to take off this bit of masking tape at the end that's preventing it from fraying. So I will just take that off and then I'll come back to you. You may be asking why I didn't take the masking tape off on film. And there's a simple reason for that. I couldn't see the end. Okay, and I was faffing about so long that in the end, it was just wasting film. And so I've just taken the masking tape off at that point there. Right, so our next thing that we need to do is we bring our 2 points together there. And that is now going to be the eye. And then what we're going to do is along the length of our cordage, we're going to bury this bottom end into the main body of the top one here. And so, but before we do that, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start tapering. And to taper it, what we're going to do is take out some of the strands at this point, so that when this section goes into the core, there will be a gentle taper down, and then you'll be able to, it just looks smarter. It looks a lot smarter. Okay, so having now done that, the next thing we want to do is we get hold of our fid, and then, so let's just go back on this a bit. So where's my 2 points? So you can see now that's where the eye is going to be, where those 2 points are lining up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take out, so I'm going to now pull up one, and you can see it's bunching up slightly. There we go. I've taken one out, and then I'm going to go up and take a second one out very close to where I took the first one out. And you can see it'll start pulling it up, but gradually there we go. And so we've now, as you can see, we've thinned out this piece here by 2. And what I'm going to do now is just go a little bit further down, say for example at this point here, and I'm going to pull out another 2. There we go, 1, and then just coax it back into shape again. And then next to that, find another one, that one there. And this is 12 strand Dyneema. And so basically we're taking 2 out at a time. And so now I'm going to go to this next point here, and I'm going to pull out a further 2. Okay, and so now you can see now I've pulled out 2, 4, and then a little bit further down. So just stretch that out again. And then probably at about that point there, take out another 2. And I've got 2 this time, just pull them out. Oh no, I haven't, I've only got 1. 2, there we go. And then just pull it down there a bit. And then what we're going to do is just go down a little bit further on. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, and take out another 2 about that point there. Okay, and so now now that we've taken them out, the next thing that we want to do is just go along, and where each one exits from the actual weave itself, we're going to cut it flush. So take your scissors, cut it flush. Scissors, cut flush. Let's see, where's these two coming out? Oh, so catch that one there. There we go. And then let's see, take these two out just here. Okay, and then when you've done that, just run your hand across it again and just pull it down, and you can see now here we have got ourselves a nice taper has appeared along the length of our rope from our marker point to the very end. Okay, so if I bring these up together now, where we have our 2 points that actually create the actual eye, the next thing that I'm going to want to do is just go along, and you can then see here where this ends. So where this one ends, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get hold of my D-splicer, and I'm going to insert my D-splicer. So let's see, bring them together, measure it correctly. So in other words, my D-splicer wants to go in at that point there on the top one. So it's going in at that point there. And then what we want to do is just run it up. So we run the D-splicer from that point there all the way up to that red one there. And to make it a little bit easier, just go round to that from one point to the other and just open up the weave a bit on your Dyneema, just in order so first of all that your D-splicer can go through at that point. So now what I'm going to do is just take it up this way, and I'm going to just make sure my D-splicer is sat in the middle. It will want to try and poke out at the odd place. And what we're doing now is we're going to feed it up through the middle. There we go, it's gradually going through, and every time you get close to a corner, it wants to stick its little head out and say, I'm ready to come out, but you're not ready for it. So what we do is just take it up, and there we have it. Eventually, it can be a bit of a faff to get your D-splicer all the way up there. And now that we've come there to that point there, the next thing that we want to do is we want to pull our tapered end through. And so to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is just separate the wires on my D-splicer at that point there. And then once I've done that, I'm just going to feed a couple of the strands through, maybe a little bit more, just to get the majority of it through. So I've got 4 strands actually going through at that point there. And then once you've got them there, just lock them off at the top there. Now, another thing that you can do just to assist you a little bit is at that point where the actual needle is coming out, what you can do is just go in above your D-splicer at that point there and just open up the gap a little bit more so that it doesn't catch as easily on our Dyneema that we're pulling through. And then now that you've done that, all we do now is just gently, and you can see now here, it's slipping through, and gently we're taking it through, and keep pulling, and eventually what we're looking for is we're pulling it through until our red dot that we marked here matches up with that red dot there. And so keep pulling it through, keep pulling, and there we go. We've now matched it up. And what I want to do now is at the bottom end here is pull those loose, pull those 4 strands that we captured earlier, pull them out. There we go. Might be slippery Dyneema, but it doesn't half catch on everything. And then once we've done that, you can now see we've almost completed our splice. And all we need to do now is just make sure that the dot we've got there is lined up, and then just pull it through and just gently with your fingers smooth the braid down again. Take a few times, so dress it smartly, as they say, and just roll it round in your fingers, because what we want to do is we want to end up with a nice eye splice at the top there, and we still need to pull more through. So just gently work your way down. And then what I'm going to do now is just pull it back a little bit at this point here. There we go. And then pull it through. And I've got 2 loose stray strands there, but keep dressing it smartly and just roll it around so it dresses nice and smartly. And you'll see now gradually, well, it's probably harder to see on camera here, but we've got a nice taper coming down here. And what I'm going to do now is just cut those 2 strands flush, and they will bury themselves into the outer core as such. And so just basically that's it, nice and tight, dress it smartly. And you can see now here we have now created our eye splice in our Dyneema. So in theory, this is now complete, because if I take this now and I pull on it really hard, what's happening is the outer core is bearing down on the inner core, and it is as strong can be. And to be honest, you can go ahead and use it like this and it will not come apart. But the problem with Dyneema is, if you're making a simple eye splice like this, the problem is that when there is no tension on it, then it basically could work its way loose. So what I'm going to do in the next little section of the video, what we're going to do is we're going to actually then lock this in place by doing some similar to seizing. It is seizing, but we're just using it on a single rope. So I will just get my gear ready, and then we will lock this in place with a little bit of coloured seizing. Right, so as you can see, I have cut myself some whipping twine, and the approximate measurements for this is about an arm's length. You know, perhaps it's a little bit too long for what I want, but better too much than too little. Okay, so once I've got my whipping twine in place here, the next thing I want to do is I just want to select myself a nice needle, and so just shake them out, find an appropriate needle, and I think that's the right one. No, too long. Just right. Okay, and so now get those out of the way. And the next thing I want to do is just thread my needle. And obviously you're watching now a semi-blind man trying to thread it. Oh, and there you go, it worked. First time. Well, that did surprise me. Okay, and then just pull a bit through, because we don't want to lose it partway through our work. So now that I've got my whipping twine on my needle, the next thing that I want to do is I want to get hold of my Dyneema, and just make sure it's all dressed smartly. And then at about that point where my thumb and my finger are, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a little bit of just common style whipping up that part there. And basically when you're putting your whipping twine on, you're looking to go up along here approximately 1.5 times the diameter of your cordage that you're covering. And so the first thing that I'm going to do, the other end where there isn't a needle on, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw my twine over at that point there, and we're going to tie a simple clove hitch. And if you don't know the clove hitch, I'll put a link down in the description just for the clove hitch itself. And then we bring it so it's going over the work at that point there and coming out at the left hand side. And I'm just going to pinch that off there to lock it in place. And then what we're going to do now is go over the work again and cross over to the right hand side, and then just pinch it off at that point there. The next thing I'm going to do is bring it underneath on the right hand side, and then once I've brought it underneath on the right hand side, I'm going to pass it underneath itself at that point there. And there we have it. We should now have one in number, yes we have, gosh, one in number clove hitch tied at that point there. Right, so that should now be nice and tightly locked in place. And the next thing we're going to do, all we're going to do is just do a little bit of whipping going from left to right. And so I'm going to take it around underneath, and I'm going to catch that little bit that's sticking out there just to lock it in place a little bit more. And then take it around underneath again and catch it again for a second time. And then once you've done that for a second time, you can now start pulling up really, really tight at this point here. And I'm going to go down around again, around the back, and go over again. And what we can do now is, if we want to, just to make it a little bit easier, we can actually cut that out now. So get your little snips in there, cut that piece out. Okay, and then it's not in the way. And what we're doing is just turn your work over and just make sure it's nice and parallel on both sides. And just keep going around and around. Just keep going until you've got approximately 1 and 1.5 to 1.5 times the actual diameter of your Dyneema. Gosh, that wasn't easy to say. Right, so we're getting close to that point there now. Let's see, yeah, I'm going to do, oh, let's do a couple more. Just round again, and then just check the back side, make sure it's nice and neat and tidy. And then what we're going to do now is just bring it around to the top. Now that we've brought it around to the top, the next thing I want to do is, through the center of my Dyneema, I'm going to pass my needle through. So just take it down through the center, and you're going to have to worm your way through. It will be a little bit tricky, and just check on the back side that it's coming up above, just above your last turn. And so now that we've done that, we know it's coming up above the last turn. Pull your needle through, and then pull through the excess, and that will then start to lock it into place. Right, now we've done that, we then turn it over, and where we've turned it over, you can see where it's coming out at the top here. And what we want to do is go roughly or directly opposite this at that point there, punch it through, and it's now coming through this side here. So punch it through, pull, and we've now got ourselves a nice straight line at that point there. And what we're doing in effect is we're locking the outer and the inner core together. And so now what we do is, on this side here, we now go back down through that hole that we first created there. So push it through. Might take a bit of teasing. No, I've completely missed at that point there. Keep pushing through until it comes out next to, there you go, it's coming out next to the last one, and pull it through. Just make sure it's not getting caught up on anything, and I've got my loop caught. Pull it through, and you can see now at the back and at the front we now have a straight line. Well, what we want to do now is come down, and so we're creating a tram line from that one to the bottom here. So take it through at that point there. Make sure it's coming out on the back side at the right position and pull it through. There we go. And we now have a nice tram line at that point there. Turn it over, and what we're looking for now is we want to follow that tram line there. So we go down at that point there for a second time, or is that the third time because the initial entry? Anyway, so now we've got two nice parallel tram lines on both sides. I could have perhaps done that a little bit neater. But now that we've got those two tram lines there, pull it through as tight as you can and then lock it off with your fingers. When you've done that, the next thing that you want to do is you want to take your needle and you want to pass it underneath the first one, underneath the first tram line. I think I caught it badly then. There, underneath the first tram line, pull it through until we've just got, well, a little bit of a loop. So we've got a little bit of a loop there. What we want to do now is just pass our needle through that loop there. Whoop, my needle's come off. Pass it through there and then pull up, and that will then lock it off at that point there. I'm just going to thread my needle again, and there we go. I've threaded my needle again, and we're going to do exactly the same on the left hand tram line. So take your needle underneath, just underneath the first one. That's it, between the two tram lines there. Pull it through until we end up with a loop at that point there. And then when we have that loop there, just pull it through a bit more so you can see it better. You see that loop there. We then take our needle, pass it down through that loop, and then pull it up nice and tightly, dress it smartly, and there we have it. We now have some nice seizing in place, which is squeezing down as hard as it can on the outer and inner core, but not only that, it's actually going through the outer and inner core and locking them all in place, so that when your actual Dyneema is slack, so when it's not being used, there is no way that that could accidentally work its way loose. And so now that you've done that, all you need to do now is just go in there, cut it flush, and there we have it. We've now locked our eye in place on our Dyneema. And so that's basically how to do it. Another little tip is I like to do it only for security. I don't know whether or not you need to, but just there where you've created that little knot, just put a little dab of glue on, just so that it can't become frayed and undone, anything like that. And so there you have it. That's how you put an eye splice in Dyneema.